come and preach for Matt for 5 years, but when you live 668 miles away and are a pastor, it's difficult to get here on a Sunday morning, as you might guess. So I have to go ahead and apologize in advance and ask for your grace. Spring break ends today, which means our 3 girls start school again tomorrow morning early, and we're driving from the service home. So we will not be able to greet as many of you as we would normally like to do. We're going to have to bolt pretty fast. So thank you for your grace on that. Sorry that we're not able to stay longer in this case. The plane tickets were higher than usual, and we found a good deal on a rental car, so we drove. But we're going to have to roll pretty quickly. It's really a delight for me to be here with you this morning. I love preaching. I love sharing with anyone who will listen about the greatness of Jesus and His Word. And so go ahead and grab your pulpit Bibles, or your pew Bibles rather. We're going to be in the book of Daniel today. It is a quirky place that we are in the Scriptures today. I'll just go ahead and tell you that up front. I'm going to read it and you're thinking, this is weird. What is going on? And how is he going to preach about this? When we look at the Old Testament, there are several things we have to do. So I'm sorry, we meet in a school. I have a very big stage and a very small pulpit, so I'm used to walking around a lot. So this is really different for me. It's nice. But I don't know if I can stand there the whole time. I might get a little antsy. When you're in the Old Testament, you have to ask at least 3 different kinds of questions. There are more you could ask that would be helpful. But you've got to think on at least 3 levels of what's happening. The first level, the most obvious level, is what's happening to the people in the story, right? And when you read a story, that's your natural question. What's God doing in these people's lives? And if I can see what God is doing for them, maybe I can figure out what it means for me. Now the second level, one that we rarely ever think about, is the fact that someone wrote this book of the Bible at a particular time to a particular group of people. In this case, Daniel probably wrote these stories at the end of his life, reflecting back on God's faithfulness to him, and particularly trying to help the Israelites who were living in Babylon. So they're in exile. They've been taken away. They live far away from the promised land. How is it that you can live faithfully in a culture that is always trying to make you be unfaithful? Daniel wrote this book for that purpose. So you have to keep that in mind. And then the third level on which you have to think about an Old Testament passage is, what does this have to do with Jesus? See, we live after Jesus has come, so we know the punchline to the story. We know that, in fact, all of the Old Testament, everything God does there, is working forward towards Jesus. Jesus himself tells us that. Go read Luke 24 sometime. Twice in Luke 24, he has an opportunity to say whatever he wanted. Right after the resurrection, he chooses to tell his followers, let me show you how the whole Old Testament is pointing ahead to me. He's the punchline. He's the conclusion. He's the point. The whole story is about how will God redeem his people, and Jesus is the Redeemer. So Jesus is the main character of the whole Bible. And so anywhere you are in the text, you have to ask the question, what does this have to do with Jesus? Some places are clearer and more obvious. Other places, maybe like this morning, you'll think, I don't have any clue what this has to do with Jesus or me or anything else. And so we will work through this text together this morning. We're going to be in Daniel 2 and Daniel 4, because they're both dreams of the king. I'm not going to read every verse because we would be here a lot longer than we should be. It's very long. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to hang with me. I'm going to read and sort of fill in the details and tell you where I'm going, and you just keep jumping with me, okay? Daniel 2, starting in verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. He's the king of Babylon. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Jump down to verse 9. The king calls in his servants. He doesn't say, explain the dream to me. He says, tell me what my dream was. The king said, tell me the dream, and I shall know then that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans, his advisors, answered, there's not a man on earth who can answer the king's demand. For no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So Daniel catches wind of what's going on, and he asks to have an appointment with the king. And then in 17, Daniel made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, who you might know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those, by the way, are their slave names, their Babylonian names. They've been renamed, but their real names, their Hebrew names, how they know themselves truly, are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So after God reveals the vision to him, he shows him the dream. Daniel shows up in verse 27 for his appointment with the king. Daniel answered the king, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in your bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, the king thought of what would be after this. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind." So here's the dream, quickly. He has a dream of a statue. The statue is this huge statue made of all these different materials: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. And as he looks at the statue, a small rock comes tumbling along, smashes the statue to bits and pieces, and then this little rock begins to grow. And grow, and it becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth. And that's his dream. If you had that dream, you would have no idea what to do with it. And neither does the king. So verse 44, Daniel tells him what it means. "In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms." Each of the materials represents different kingdoms of the world. "And bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever, just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke into pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure." That's dream one. Turn over to Daniel 4 now. Another dream comes to the same king, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Look in chapter 4 and look down to verse 10. Again, I'm going to be skipping through quickly, so follow with me. Verse 10, "I saw a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew, became strong, and its top reached to the heaven. It was visible to the end of the whole earth." A great, powerful, impressive tree, right? Skip down to 13. "Behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, 'Chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit.' He leaves the tree as a stump." Verse 16, "Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones. To the end, the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will, and sets it over the lowliest of men." So this time, Nebuchadnezzar decides, I'm not going to ask anyone if they know what my dream is. I'm just going to tell them, and then maybe they can tell me what it means. But no one can, so eventually he ends up again at Daniel. And Daniel shows up in verse 24. Here's what Daniel tells him. "It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will." From that point, the text tells us nothing happens for a year. And then a year later, Nebuchadnezzar is standing in his palace, surveying how impressive and wonderful everything is that he built, and he says to himself, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power, as a royal residence, and for the glory of my majesty?" And while the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field," which is exactly what happens. He loses his mind, and he acts like an animal. for a period of time. And then verse 34, at the end of that time, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word. This is a long and strange trip that we have through these passages. And yet we know, even from Sunday school this morning, we know that you love to clarify for us what's true. You love to make clear how the whole word is about Jesus, about the salvation that he offers. And that even this morning we believe that you want to do that and can do that and will do that. So we ask indeed that you will help our hearts to understand what you have for us here, and that we will listen intently. In Jesus' name. Amen. You are magnificent. You live bravely, have a fierce mind, and a full heart, and a relentless appetite for adventure. Wouldn't you love if someone said that to you? If that's how they described you. No one described me that way. I read it on the side of a bottle of cold brew coffee at the grocery store. And I thought, how ridiculous! They don't know me. They don't know if I'm magnificent. They don't know anything about me. Or do they? Don't the marketers know something about the human heart? That's why they're able to keep their jobs and keep selling. They know, in fact, that if on a bottle of cold brew you write that someone is magnificent and has a relentless appetite for adventure, that somehow that might appeal to them. Because we all want to be great, don't we? We all want to have a sense that we're great, that we're wonderful. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to be able to seem that we're enough, that we could impress someone with something. And we all fear deep down that it's not true. We all fear that actually we're much less impressive than we hope, and that everyone else will see through it if they have a chance. Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like, I'm so much less impressive than even I want to be? I'm certainly less impressive than he is or than she is. And if people really knew me, they'd be very, very disappointed. It's the human heart. In fact, it's why people wag whatever they have in your face. Their riches, their successes, their good looks. They show it off because they're hoping that maybe after they show it off to you that you will give them some sort of indication that they're really okay. Now, interestingly enough, this is exactly where Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, finds himself in these dreams. He finds himself feeling incredibly anxious and insecure. The king of the world finds himself full of anxiety. It's interesting. Daniel is revealing throughout the book of Daniel these various interactions he's had with the king. Very briefly, Daniel's story. He's captured from Jerusalem as a young man, a teenager. He and his friends are carried off. They're indoctrinated in Babylonian education so that they will be useful servants in the kingdom of Babylon. And throughout the book of Daniel, Daniel is living in tension. And he's trying to communicate to us that through his experience, he sees you can faithfully follow God in a culture that doesn't want you to. But it's really hard. Because you have two instincts that will get you off track. The first instinct is to assimilate. I'll go all the way. I'll just do whatever they tell me. I'll quietly, secretly believe. But I'll just go all the way and just do whatever they say. And Daniel shows us you cannot do that. You can't just assimilate and be like everyone else in Babylon. So then our next instinct is, I should separate, right? I should run and hide. I'm going to hide in the corner somewhere. And me and my friends will keep a holy huddle, and we won't be corrupted by the world. But Daniel doesn't choose that at all. He, in fact, participates fully in Babylon without becoming fully one of them. He doesn't assimilate, he doesn't separate, he participates. In a way that allows him to say, I am in the world. He is, throughout the book of Daniel, he is in the government, working for the Babylonian government. But he does not become of them. He's in the world, but not of it, as we sometimes say in the church. And that is very challenging to do. And Daniel wants to show us that you actually, by God's grace, you actually can do it. But the ways you do it are first by admitting that it's very hard. You see Daniel and his friends in Daniel 1 taking great care. And in multiple opportunities where they almost lose their lives, they admit, we may not make it. But if so, that's okay. As long as we follow God. So it's very hard. Secondly, you have to realize that the only way to do it is by relentlessly centering yourself on God all the time. That by word and prayer, they are constantly keeping before them God's word and God's ways. Which, third, helps them to be clear on their identity. That they don't actually believe, fundamentally, that they're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those aren't their real names. Yeah, they've been renamed by Babylon, but they know deep down that God has names for them. God has identities for them. And that's who they really are. And then finally, and fourthly, what the book of Daniel teaches us is that to do this, you actually need a little help from your friends. That them doing it together in community allows them to hang in there on the really hard stuff. So that's a big overview of Daniel. And here, in these moments, Daniel, a slave, a servant in the kingdom, has these opportunities to interact with the king. And in these two chapters, in these two dreams, you see this. Here's today's sermon in a sentence. Although we all try to build our own kingdom, there's only one true king. And in the end, all things must give way to his kingship. Let me say it again. Although we all naturally try to build our own kingdoms, there's only one true king. And in the end, all things must give way to his true kingship. Now you have an outline in your bullets in there. 3 points, because I'm a pastor and you have to have 3 points. Generally, it works well. First, the dreams of the king. There are 2 dreams, right? 2 dreams that he has. Here's the first one, the statue. Here's a statue. It's built of all these metals, gold, silver, bronze, iron, clay, and a little rock comes along and smashes the statue to bits. It smashes it so completely that it says they blow away the wind. There's nothing left of this huge, impressive statue. And then this little rock grows and becomes a mountain that covers the whole world. First dream, okay? Second dream, even weirder, there's a huge tree in a field. It's impressive. The birds love to come. It has fruit. It's a great tree. And then it gets cut down. And then all of a sudden, the stump that's left loses its mind and becomes like a beast for a long, set period of time. Now, one of the reasons you know that these are likely real dreams is because they are as weird as your real dreams, right? Dreams have this odd quality to them. Even the less weird dreams have these otherworldly feelings where things don't quite work like they do in real life. And so a stump losing its mind actually isn't that odd in a dream. Now, typically, God doesn't speak to us through dreams. Again, in Sunday school this morning, it was great. We talked about the value of the Word of God, right? God speaks to us through the Word. He gives us clarity through the Word of God. Most of your dreams aren't teaching you anything. You have the dream where you were late for the exam again. Right? Have you ever had that one? All my life. You have the dream that you're late for an important presentation at work and you show up in your underwear. And everyone laughs at you. Or you have the dream where the hamburger is eating you. But our dreams are weird. And mostly they don't mean much, or maybe at most they reveal some deep thoughts or anxieties that might be on our mind. Now in this case, you've got both things going on. You've got Nebuchadnezzar's anxieties being revealed, but you also have God revealing truths to him. You know, it's interesting. These dreams are about Nebuchadnezzar as king. They're about his kingdom. They're about how he feels about his kingdom. And about the truths of what's going to happen to his kingdoms. He has to realize, in fact, that all things are not as great as they seem. Which would be surprising to anyone who knew Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is literally the most powerful man in the world at the time. It's not exaggeration. There's no bluster here. He was the most powerful and impressive person in the world of his day. He could have stood next to Kate Winslet on the Titanic and said, I actually am the king of the world. I'm really the king of the world. Everyone bows down. I'm the king of Babylon, and Babylon rules all that we know. He's very, very impressive, and he knows it's fake. He knows it means much less than everyone thinks it means. It even means less than he thinks it means. And he's deeply, deeply insecure. He knows that his attempts at glory and greatness are going to come up short one way or another, right? Because he knows that Babylon hasn't always been in charge, and they took over from the people before them, and that probably someone will knock them off. And even if it doesn't happen in his own age, he knows he's going to die. And death is the great equalizer. It levels the playing field. for everyone. And so he knows that all the trumpeting of his own glory is just as bluster. It reminded me, I don't know if you realize this, that Adolf Hitler promised that the Third Reich would reign for 1,000 years. And as powerful as he was, he only came up 988 years short. On a much lesser, maybe even more ridiculous level, I watch a lot of college football down south, and there was a commercial on ESPN this fall. And they would promo various games with this commercial. It's a song by Fall Out Boy that goes, "You'll remember me for centuries." And then they would show like Nebraska versus Purdue tomorrow at 3 p.m. No one's going to remember that past 6 p.m. tomorrow. No less for centuries. But that's what we do. We bluster. We act as if we're much greater than we really are because we're hoping that someone will tell us, in fact, that we're okay. And that's exactly how Nebuchadnezzar felt. He knows that he's building his house on sand. He knows that he has shaky foundations. It's in fact why he gets so angry. When no one can tell him what his dream means, it's not that he doesn't have a good idea what it means. He knows exactly what it means, and he's terrified of it being the case. And he wants someone else to say, "Oh no, it's okay. You're going to be fine, Nebuchadnezzar." Because he realizes that he's in fact not fine with it. That everything he's relying on is shaky. And that in fact may not live long past him at all. It may fall apart the second he dies. And then what was it all for? You see in chapter 3, if you go read Daniel chapter 3, he actually makes a grab to impress everyone even more. He wants everyone to bow down to him, and he makes, ironically, a statue. I mean, come on. You just saw the statue get smashed, and he goes, no, that won't happen to me. I'll make a great statue. People will bow down to me. He's desperately grabbing for more, while deep down he realizes that he's likely to have less and less. See, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't have a steady identity. He doesn't have some long-lasting source of truth and identity that will keep him centered and focused and steady. He is shaky, and he is anxious because he knows how fleeting it all really is. His fears are just like yours and mine. He fears he's not quite enough. He fears that he's not going to really get it done. He fears that he's going to be exposed for who he really is. And then deep down, he's terrified of that exact thing happening. He knows that something will take him down, another kingdom or death itself. And on his deathbed, he's worried that he will realize, in fact, he lived for himself and it didn't amount to very much at all. He wants some circumstances, some success, right? If I could just be more successful, if more people would bow down to me. If I kill all these wise men, that will show everyone how strong I am. And he's hoping somehow something will fill that void in his heart. He's terrified that he's going to be revealed to be very little, despite all his bluster. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that you know, right? Everyone else may not know, and you may think everyone else has it more together than you, but you know what you're really like on the inside. And sometimes you love yourself, and sometimes you hate yourself. And yet you know that your foundations are shaky, that in fact, you're living for your own dreams and your own hopes. You're trying to make your own little kingdom. Yes, you're not trying to be the king of the world. We all know better than that. But we at least would like to be the king of my own world. I'd at least like to be the center of my own life. Some of you are thinking, well, obviously, isn't that what life is about? To live for your own hopes and dreams? It's what every TV show and movie tells you, right? Just believe in yourself in any kids movie you've ever seen in the last 20 years. Believe in yourself and you'll be wonderfully happy. But what if you know yourself? What if you realize, I don't know that there's a whole lot in here, really, that I should be believing in. And yet, what do? You try harder. I'm going to keep living for myself and believing, and maybe through the next thing, my hopes and dreams will finally come to pass. And finally, I'll feel like I've always wanted to feel. But it's a shaky foundation. It's the wrong kind of hope, and all of it is driven by the wrong kind of pride, which is our second point. What we're really seeing about Nebuchadnezzar is what his pride looks like. Now, there are two kinds of pride. The word right? It has a range of meaning. There's two kinds of pride. There's a good pride, a healthy pride. One of my favorite bands says it this way: I want to have pride like my mother has, but not like the kind in the Bible that turns you bad. But there's a good pride. What's wrong with being proud? Can I not be proud of my hard work, or should I not be proud of my children? Of course you should. Right? There's a healthy kind of pride that says, this is something good, and I can recognize that it's good, and I can delight in it. Isak Dinesen, who wrote the book Out of Africa, that was turned into a movie that maybe some of you have seen, she says, good pride is this: it's faith in the idea God had when He made you. I kind of like that. It's faith in the idea God had when He made you, that He's given you strengths and weaknesses. Lots of limits. We don't like limits. But He's given you strengths and weaknesses, and they're givens. He's given you something, and you can take what you've been given and make the most of it for God's glory. Now, our problem is, we love our strengths, we hate our weaknesses. We don't really act as if they've been given to us. We act as if they're from us and for us. And unrelated to God, we try to make the most of our strengths and minimize our weaknesses so we can be greater than we feel today. And that's the kind of pride we're talking about. When we have a negative sense that I can reach and grab for more than really belongs to me. That life is in fact from me and for me. Instead of all of it's given as a gift from God. And when we think that life is from us or for us, we become self-focused. We become self-centered. We become self-obsessed, don't we? It's all about me. It's all about me getting what I want. And that is the human condition. And that is the kind of pride that we're talking about when we talk about Nebuchadnezzar. He is very impressed with himself. And both his dreams connect to his pride, don't they? They connect to his sense of his ego. How impressed he is with himself. And does it mean anything that I am the king of the world? Now we often think of pride and arrogance and cockiness in one category, and then insecurity and low self-esteem as being the opposite of that, right? We think of someone who struts around, very impressed with themselves, and then the person who sort of hangs their head because they're ashamed of themselves. And we think of those things as opposites, but they're not all. They're actually two sides of the same coin. They go together like bagel and cream cheese or biscuits and gravy, right? You don't want to separate them. They actually are two sides of the same coin. They're both driven by the same impulses, that pride drives it all. So if you think you're pretty great, you'll be cocky and strut around. I mean, let's be honest, I'm pretty great. Right? You strut around. That's a kind of pride. But if that pride fails you, if you become convinced, oh no, I'm not as great as I want to be, that same pride can drive you to hang your head and mope around and have low self-esteem, right? Pride is being puffed up, full of hot air, instead of being filled with something important. You're full of hot air, hoping that it will impress someone, and that by sticking your chest out and strutting around, that people will be impressed, which of course we all know rarely accomplishes that. We all usually see right through that, right? But insecurity is just when your puffed up bag of air gets deflated, and you feel the pain of not being nearly as impressive as you hoped. And so Nebuchadnezzar is very puffed up. And he's really, really afraid he's going to get shrunk down to size. And his dreams show, in fact, that not only will he be put in this place and shrunk down to size, but it terrifies him. He can't sleep as a result. See, Nebuchadnezzar wishes he had more control and sovereignty over life than he actually has. Nebuchadnezzar would love to be God. Just like Adam and Eve would have loved to have taken the place of God. We don't listen to God. We can make our own choices and do things our own way. And just like you and me, every day, wish we had sovereignty and power and control over our lives and our circumstances, don't we? I mean, wouldn't it be great if you could just control, make your outcomes what you want them to be? But what Daniel's showing us is that even for this incredibly powerful person, that's a false grab. It's grabbing for something that doesn't belong to you. That even for the king of the world, life is not from him or for him. Life is from God and for God. And so you see this incredible pride on Nebuchadnezzar's part and this incredible humility for Daniel. Daniel constantly living under the threat of being eradicated. Go read through the first 6 chapters of Daniel, the narrative of Daniel. Over and over again, Daniel and his friends are threatened with some form of death or dismemberment. And he's humble. He comes to the king quietly and humbly. When he hears what's about to happen, that the king has decreed that all the wise men of Babylon are going to get executed, rather than panicking like most of us would, he calls his friends to pray. He actually makes an appointment with the king. He's not trying to get away from the king. He makes an appointment with the king, and then he calls his friends to pray. In 2:18, he says, seek mercy. Pray that God may allow us and the other wise men of Babylon to not be destroyed. And you see this incredible humility. That Daniel sees that he is not a wizard. He doesn't wield prayer like it's his own power. He's simply saying we should pray and connect with the God of heaven. And if we can connect with God, maybe God will do something. When you pray, think about how ridiculous this is. I don't know if you've ever done this. You wouldn't do it openly because it would be so ridiculous. Have you ever prayed for something, God did it, and then you patted yourself on the back? I mean, it's pretty hard to get by with that, right? It takes a pretty high-handed level of arrogance. I prayed, by definition, I humbled myself. God did it, and then when he did it, it would be ridiculous for me to pat myself on the back. What you do when God answers your prayer is what? You praise him and thank him. Which is exactly what Daniel did. If you look in chapter 2, after he gets this vision, he knows that he has a gift, that God likes using him, so he prays that God will help him understand the dream. He gets a vision from God, and the next couple of verses are praise. He praises God. He praises God for who he is and for what it all means. That God is at work. Daniel is acting like a person of faith, right? He's putting himself under God. And he says, God, it's your work and your power and your grace, but would you show mercy? In this case, we need your mercy. And when God shows up, Daniel doesn't say, man, I am a good prayer. He says, man, God's a great God and worthy of my praise. We also see a contrast between Daniel's God-centeredness and Nebuchadnezzar's self-centeredness, right? Nebuchadnezzar's very impressed with himself. He has lots of reason to be. Daniel's not impressed with himself. He speaks incredibly clearly and confidently before the king who has already issued a death warrant for Daniel. Keep that in mind, right? He's already planning to be killed by this king, and he goes to him and he speaks confidently and clearly, but not because he's impressed with himself. Because he has peace with God. Because he knows who he is. And he understands that even if the king destroys him physically, that is not the end of it. So he's able to go before God, before Nebuchadnezzar, knowing that God is with him, and speak clearly and confidently to Nebuchadnezzar. You know, it's interesting. If you were watching this scene in the court, when Daniel walks in, you go, oh look, it's the slave kid from Israel. He's just some, government worker, and here's the king of the world. There's the powerful guy sitting on the throne. There's the weak, miserable guy who's probably really anxious. And yet in the text, Daniel's the one who seems clear and confident. And the king of the world is the one who's anxious. Because Daniel knows who he is. Daniel knows where his future lies. Daniel isn't overly concerned about making himself great. And when he shares the dream with the king, pretty hard thing to do, right? To share the dream that someone else has that they haven't told you what it is. It's pretty hard. None of us can do that. Nebuchadnezzar marvels. What does Daniel say? This isn't about me. I don't have any special wisdom. But there's a God in heaven who revealed it to me. Nobody can tell you the answer to your dream, king. It's ridiculous. Unless there's someone who reveals truth. He says there is. There's a God in heaven who reveals truth. And he revealed it to me. So it's not about me, king. This is about God and what God wants to do with you. It's interesting. Daniel in the scene has very little, right? He's already under a death sentence. He's a slave. He's a lowly government official at this point. He hasn't been elevated as highly as he will be. He doesn't have anything. Nebuchadnezzar has it all. And it's an all that can and will slip away. He has it all, but it doesn't mean a thing. Because he knows that it can go away. It's interesting. You see this pride when he walks out in the next chapter, in chapter 4. So he has the second dream. You're going to lose your mind. Daniel warns him, hey king, this is about you. And if you want to acknowledge that God is God, if you think that you're sovereign and in control, this is going to happen to you. Don't do it. Daniel lovingly pleads with him, as God often pleads with us. Turn away from your sin. If you don't turn away from your sin, it's going to destroy you. Don't do it. Come back. There's an opportunity. There's grace. There's mercy. But the king has pride, right? So he goes, yeah, I mean, not to me. I'm sure that pride will get somebody else. But the problem with pride is you rarely see how prideful you are. Right? Pride blinds you. We hardly ever think we're as prideful as we actually are. Because that's what pride does to us. It makes us confident in ourselves, and thus we can't see our weaknesses. And so Nebuchadnezzar is not convinced. So he hears this story. After Daniel has already given him a helpful interpretation, Daniel gives him a second one. The king goes, I'm okay. And a year later, you see, he's standing on the walls. He's standing in the palace looking over Babylon. Now listen, if anyone could have and should have been proud of what they'd done, Nebuchadnezzar qualifies. He took Babylon from sort of a regional power to the kingdom of the world. He built a city wall around Babylon so wide that 2 whole chariots could pass each other with no problem. On top of the wall, okay, he built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is one of the wonders, the ancient wonders of the world, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He has a lot to be impressed with, but he overreaches. You see it? He stands on the wall and he goes, did I not do all this? Is this not for my majesty and my glory? What's he doing? He's putting himself in the place of God, right? He's standing above everything. Look at, I'm better than all of this. I did it all. Great is me. And as he says it, the text tells us that a voice comes from heaven and says to him, Nebuchadnezzar, now the prophecy is coming true on you. And Nebuchadnezzar loses his mind. And it says he literally acts like an animal. He loses his mind. And he grows his hair and his nails. He's unrecognizable almost as a human being. He loses his mind until the end, which we'll get to in just a second. Here you see Nebuchadnezzar's pride is destroying him, right? He thinks way too highly of himself. He's puffed up, hoping he'll be greater than he is. So I want you to pause for a second and think about yourself. Where do you see pride in your own life? Now, there are issues in life, there are struggles in life that not everyone shares. Okay? We all know this. Different people have different challenges and so forth. Everyone has a pride issue of some kind. We all wish and want to be greater than we are, and sometimes we're cocky about it, other times we're deflated about it. But we all have pride issues. So, for example, you spend a whole lot of your time trying to figure out how to entertain yourself and be comfortable and happy. Yes, right. Me too. Why? Because we're the center of our own world. And we're convinced and concerned primarily about feeling good and about myself. That's a form of pride. How about this? Do you ever act as if something that is simply a gift, something God gave you to use for the good of yourself and other people in the world, do you act as if it's from you and for you and it's all about you? Yes. How about this one? Do you ever feel like you're trusting God and praying to Him, but really what you mean is, if you give me the circumstances I want, then I'll be okay? And if I don't get the circumstances, I will not be okay? Yes. All of us feel that way, right? I really need these things to work a certain way. And what you see in Daniel's life is the humility that says, I'm not God, I can't control anything. So I will center myself on God. I'll act, right? He doesn't sit on the couch when the decree comes out that they're going to be killed. He acts wisely and with faith. But he understands that wise action and prayer that's all he can do. And that outcomes belong to God. Results belong to God. And if you want to center yourself on God, you pursue, you be wise, you make the right move, you do whatever you can figure out that is wise and good and honor God and love other people, but you do not and cannot control the outcomes. See, again, it's pride to think that we can be in control and control all the outcomes. Only God controls outcomes. And Daniel knew that very clearly. He was constantly under the threat of death. And repeatedly, God saved him. But he knew it was God. He knew it was God. It humbled him and caused him to stay centered on God. Now, how do you get from prideful, which we all are naturally, how do we get from there to being God-centered? Our final point. We're going to see how Nebuchadnezzar begins to get there and a way for us to get there as well. There was a warning in the dream that he has, right? And as Daniel interprets it for him, he tells him, listen, this is going to happen to you unless you repent. And if it happens, when it happens, what you've got to do is repent and stop acting as if you're the God of the universe. You've got to stop putting yourself at the center, Nebuchadnezzar. You've got to turn away from your overreach and grabbing things that don't quite really belong to you. In a sense, he's got to admit and recognize that he's not sovereign, that he's not in control, that he's not God, which is one of the hardest things for people to do. You may have seen the movie years ago, Groundhog Day. At one point, he says, I think I might be God. She was really good. Well, not the God, but maybe a God at least. Right? Most of us know. Most of us know I'm God, but we really wish we could generate a little more control of the universe, a little more control of at least our own circumstances, or our kids, or our boss, or our car, or something. We wish we could control things. We wish we wouldn't get towed from downtown Manhattan. Right? Happens to people, I hear. We wish that our kids would listen to us when we tell them this. We wish the boss wouldn't fire us for no reason. And yet we have no control over this. Not really. And what you see in Nebuchadnezzar is he thinks he does. He thinks he can be like God in that sense, and he is mistaken. And here at the end, he finally repents. And it says, in verse 34, at the end of the days, at the end of his madness, it says he looks to heaven. Now I want you to think about the posture contrast. It's pointing to something deeper than physical posture. Right before he goes crazy, what's he doing? Looking down on everything. I'm the great king! And God says, you're not. You're a king, but you're not as great as you think. And he stays in that state until he does what? Looks up. And says, I'm God. God is great. There is one God, and it is not me. And when he does that, it says his reason is restored, and he praises and blesses God. Now, whether or not he's a true believer, the text doesn't really tell us. It doesn't give us enough information to be able to conclude that. That's actually not the point, I don't think. The point for Israel, who's reading this story in exile, the point for them should be this. The great king who appears to be in charge of everything isn't in charge of much at all. The king who literally can kill you with a word. He can have you all killed. He's actually not in charge of much. He's not very powerful at all. And that's good news for you. Because the things that have power over us, the thing that has you under its thumb, the struggle, the suffering, the disease, the person that seems to run your life and control you in a way that you cannot get out from under, and it drives you crazy, and you just wish there was something you can do. That thing, that person, that suffering is not God. There is a God in heaven, he says. And it's God. And it's not Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar gets it. Shockingly, right? He actually gets it. He realizes he overreached. Look at verse 37, the final verse in the chapter 4. This is Nebuchadnezzar basically agreeing with Daniel. Because you're right. God's God, not me. Listen to what he says. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. Who's he talking about? Himself. I walk in pride. I look down on everyone. God humbled me, and now finally I realize I should have been looking up the whole time. That's remarkable coming from his lips, right? That's remarkable coming from someone who had accomplished so much. But he realized it was just puffed up. It was more hot air than anything. It didn't mean anything. And like that, it could all be taken away from him. And he realized, no, I'm not God. There is a God, and it isn't me. Let's try to bring some of this together now. Let's look back at chapter 2. Let's take the two dreams and start putting them together. What's going on here? In both cases, Nebuchadnezzar is prideful. He's impressed. He wants his kingdom to last forever. He wants everyone to know how great he is. And yet, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. And God in the first dream actually is promising, no, there's something else going to come along. This stone not made by human hands is going to come and crush all the kingdoms. So most scholars identify the kingdoms in the statue. You read chapter 2 with Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, the major kingdoms that would come from Babylon on through until Jesus' time. And interestingly, the language, you gotta love grammar sometimes, it really is helpful. He says, these kingdoms are being smashed and replaced. Some of them haven't even come yet. He doesn't just say it will happen, he's saying it's happening. The stone is doing this and is going to do it. The kingdom of God is being established, he's saying. Even though it's very quiet. Jesus teaches us left and right. The kingdom is going to come very quietly. It's going to come unassumingly. It's going to come in ways you don't expect. It's going to come when you're not looking for it. You're not always going to realize that the kingdom's at work because it's quiet. It's unassuming, like, a small rock. A huge statue made of precious metals. And what do we have here? A little rock? A little stone? I mean, it's insignificant. It's small. It's like, a mustard seed. Or, yeast. I mean, it's really, have you made bread recently? Have you looked at, how does that make that happen, right? I mean, the answer probably, but it's not because it's impressive looking. It's tiny. Then it works its way through the whole loaf of bread, right? All of a sudden everything swells and grows. He's saying the kingdom is like a little rock. You can't see it right now, Israel. You feel like you're under the thumb, but guess what? There's more coming. There's hope. The kingdom is being established, and of course, we know fully and firmly that it's really established in a new way, in a unique way, when Jesus comes, because Jesus is the King. And one of his messages he preached was, repent, because the kingdom of heaven is not tomorrow, but it's at hand. Because I'm the King. The kingdom of heaven is here. I'm the King. So you can turn to God and find mercy. Sometimes you look at what God's doing, and people rightly ask the question, how do you know? Like, how do you really know what God is like? How do you know what God's up to? Isn't it? It's funny, sometimes we're so confident we know exactly what God is like, but he doesn't conform to our way. Oh, God couldn't be like that. But then we're like, well, who knows what God is like? It's actually a really good question. How could anyone know what God is like? If he's actually how we describe him, if he's holy and transcendent, and he's other, and he's different than us, how could we know him? Well, the only way we can actually know him is if he reveals himself to us, which is exactly what Daniel says. I didn't figure this out. Nobody can figure this out. How did I know God? King? Because God revealed it to me. Now, how do you know? I'm assuming you're not having any dreams that anyone's interpreting for you that are making sense of your life. If that's how you're going through life, you probably want to talk to Matt. He might give you some help. It's probably not the most reliable way to get through life. How do you know what God's up to? Look at Jesus. Is God full of righteous anger against sin? Yes. How do you know? He put his son on the cross for your sin. Is God also full of mercy and grace? Yes. How do you know? Look at Jesus on the cross dying for your sin. Does God actually have power over death itself? Yes. How do you know? Look at Jesus up from the grave. He arose. On Easter morning, he offers you life because he's defeated death and sin. And he offers you the life that he now has. See, God's revealed himself to us in Jesus. That's the key to understanding life, is that God actually has revealed himself. He hasn't left us in the dark. He's shown us what he's like. How does he show us what he's like? He comes all the way into our situation, even into our suffering. Right, Israel? You're suffering, but God's still with you. And how do we know that God's with us? Because Jesus came and suffered with us. We sang about it earlier. He entered into all of our sickness and our woes so he could fully identify with us, yes, even our sin, and become sin for us. In exchange that sin, he'd take the sin away from us and he'd give us his righteousness. Think about the rock. Look at the description. It's a rock not made by human hands. Okay, so this isn't another human kingdom that's going to come along and smash these other kingdoms. It's something different and outside of just humanity. It's a little something that's going to come and smash everything and then create this mountain that covers the whole earth. What does that sound like? It sounds like a powerful, unshakable kingdom. Who does that? Who's going to come after the Old Testament and smash and depose the old ways of doing things and bring a kingdom that starts out really quiet and slow, yes, but will grow and grow and become a powerful, unshakable kingdom? Who is the rock you can build your life on? Jesus Christ. Jesus absolutely is the rock. He's the one who will come along and establish a different kind of kingdom, not a human kingdom, not just another way of doing life and politics. He's going to come along and establish something totally new. And that's what we're being promised here. Now listen. Will there be toil and tribulation? Absolutely. Jesus promises. In fact, he promises you will go low first before you come high, because that's what Jesus did. That there's suffering and then exaltation. Will you sometimes feel that the darkness veils his lovely face? Yes. Oftentimes you can't see what God is up to. All you know is that he must love you because he sent Jesus to die for you. You cannot see anything else clearly. all else seems bleak and black and dark. And yet in the midst of it, you can hang on to him because he died for you and he rose for you and now he lives for you and he lives with you by his Spirit if you believe in Jesus. He wants to help you. He wants to help you turn from your pride. We all have pride. Again, some of you may struggle with the strut around, cocky, aren't I great thing, and some of you may struggle with what looks like the opposite. I have nothing to strut about at all. Well, I wish I did. I wish I had a little more to show off, but I don't have anything. I'm miserable. What good am I? All of that says, I wish there was some way I could be great and mighty. And Jesus says, but you can't. You, in fact, don't need to be. You're not supposed to be the center of your own life. I am supposed to be the center of your life. Even, not only are you not king of the world, you're not king of your own life. You're not the main character of your own story. Doesn't that seem odd? Doesn't that seem wrong? Until you realize what a horrible job we do being the main character of our own story. Until we realize, in fact, we're made for God. We're made to know him and enjoy him and glorify him. And the great news for the Christian, for anyone who wants to come after Jesus, is this. If you'll turn away from your pride, like Nebuchadnezzar did, at least briefly here, if you'll turn away from your pride and say, I'm not God, I'm not in control, I humble myself before Jesus' face. Not only will he forgive you and love you, he will actually live you. The Jesus who says, I will not share my glory with people who grab for it. Don't grab for glory. You're not the king. That same God who's revealed himself in Jesus actually says to you, don't grab for it, but guess what? If you come humbly to me, I'll share it. I'll share it with you. I'll let you participate in my kingdom. And as you come after me, I'll show you how to live differently. I'll show you how to live a God-centered life. And as you live for me, I will show you that, yes, it's very challenging to live for me in a world that wants you to do the opposite. But it's joyful because I will show up. And as I do, I will both humble you again and again so that you never overreach for yourself, but that you can actually live for me and you can be reconnected with true purpose. You can reconnect with your true meaning, the reason you were created. And as you live for Jesus, you will be able to graciously live a life that says, all things are from him and through him and to him. To him be glory forever and ever. Let's pray. Father, we thank you. We thank you for Nebuchadnezzar, who is just like us. Even though he had more power, humanly speaking, his heart is like ours. Full of pride and full of anxiety and insecurity. Father, we thank you. You save us from all that. You save us from living for self. By showing us that we're not God, we're not the sovereign. Only you are. There's only one God, and you have fully revealed yourself to us in Jesus. And we can know that Jesus is building a kingdom. And he invites anyone and everyone who will humble themselves and turn from their pride and sin. Anyone can come into the kingdom. And as we do, he graciously lifts us up. Father, we're so thankful this morning. We pray that you would help us apply this message to our hearts. That you'd help us apply where we're cocky. You'd help us apply where we feel insecure. And you'd help us see that you've given us a life full of strengths and weaknesses, full of sufferings and joys. And that as we live that life, we are meant to live it centered on you. With you as the point, with you as the purpose, with you as the center of our life, with you as our King. Father, we thank you that you're so gracious. That you warn us over and over, and you graciously receive us again and again. You forgive us 70 times 7, Jesus. So you forgive us as many times as we come to you, seeking grace and mercy. And we know that it's sure because of Jesus. We thank you for his life. We thank you for his death. We thank you for his resurrection and the new life that he offers us. Father, now teach us, as we come to the table, teach us to come and experience, to taste and see the new life that you offer to you. We ask it all in Jesus' name.